Welcome to the Crazy Canuck Trucking Podcast. I am one of your hosts. I am the Size Matters Dakotan Bridget, and my co-host is
the Crazy Canuck Dave. Hey, Bridget, it's been a little while since we put something together here, and excited to have another video coming out, an audio coming out, podcast, whatever you want to call it, coming out for people. What do we need to remind people?
The timing is absolutely right to be able to put things together and put them out online. Right now, we're in the depths of winter yet here in the upper Midwest and Southern Canada. So you know what? It's a great time for people to want to listen. And if they would like to comment to us on anything, they are welcome to reach out to us at crazycanooktruckin.com. From there, you can reach all of our social media platforms, as well as send us emails, comments, ideas, other things that you want to share. We'd be happy to receive them. So now that the business portion of today is out of the way, I hear that we have something to talk about as far as a sponsor before we introduce our guest.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's not a monetary thing, but I was helped out a couple times in the last couple months by a company in Markham, Ontario. And Size Matters, have you heard of Rush Truck Centers?
I have, actually.
So I was at a Rush Truck Centers and in Markham, and the regional manager there and I had some interaction, and he helped me out a lot. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to him. His name is Jordan, and his next accomplice is Will, and both fantastic guys. Jordan is the regional manager for Rush Truck Centers in the Greater Toronto Area, what we normally call the GTA, and he has been very generous to me and helpful to me. I won't go into all the details. Mm-hmm. So I said I'm going to give him a plug on our podcast and thank him. And in the meantime, I hadn't realized how big Rush Truck Centers is. Where I was at is a international dealership, Navistar.
Okay.
Among other things, they have a petrol pass, fuel station and stuff. And in the US and Canada, well, in North America, Rush Truck Centers is not only the biggest Navistar dealer, they are also the biggest Peterbilt dealer.
That's awesome.
In North America. So I hadn't realized they were that big and that they were all as connected as they are. So Rush Truck Centers, thank you very much for helping out the Crazy Canuck and being true to your word. I really appreciate that. So we have a guest today, Bridget.
Tell me more. I'm looking forward to seeing who we're going to talk to today.
Well, he's somebody that I've known all my life, but he hasn't known me all my life. Here's a little riddle for you. Can you figure out who that would be?
Well, I didn't come to watch paint dry, so I figured I'm going to just let you start out with your introduction, and I tell me what's going on. This sounds awesome.
So this is my little brother, Andrew.
Hi, Andrew.
Welcome to our program, Andrew. Introduce yourself.
Thank you.
Tell us what you do.
What do I do? Well, I'm a dad of 4, so that's my primary. I work in the computer industry, producing computers in a company where for harsh environments. So aircraft, ships, ground vehicles, anything where you need to handle a lot of high temperature, vibration, moisture, etc. So I'm a proposal manager there, and then what I do for fun is I fly a small aircraft called the gyroplane.
So when you say harsh environments, it's going to be like my pickup. So we'll talk more about that later.
Sure. Okay. Very well.
And so, like I said, he's my little brother, so he came along a few years after I was born. And I'll tell you one thing, that the first job he had was quality inspector, or the first main job out of high school, right? Was quality inspector at company rebuilding aircraft engines. And when I saw what he did, I was like, oh no, I am not doing that job. It's inspecting rotor blades from the compressor on a turbine engine. I was like, wow. He's got more patience than me, Bridget.
Well, okay, I understand that.
Yeah, if people are familiar with, say, the Hercules aircraft, C-130s,
Yes.
and also Sea King helicopters. I worked on those for quite a while, including the old and new Hercules aircraft, rebuilding the engines. But the best part of that whole portion of my career was whenever we got back an engine that had had a failure, and then trying to figure out what had happened. So really, where my career path took me there was tear down investigations for failures, because I'm naturally inquisitive. So I really enjoyed the part where if something went kaboom, and you're left with a bunch of broken metal, and then tracing it back to what actually failed and caused that problem was really exciting stuff. So yeah, so I eventually became engineering manager on regional jet aircraft, and people might have heard of the Global Hawk. People call them drones, which is not correct, but it's a unmanned aerial vehicle or unmanned aerial system. So unpiloted aircraft, at least from the air. The Americans have quite a number of them. So yeah, I used to be engineering manager on those. So whenever something went kaboom, that was the most exciting part of my job.
So I have two questions just based on that description you gave me. One
Sure.
of them is, how often would a failed engine actually come back and need to be evaluated? I want to know if that was a frequent occurrence, number one. Two, when you said the unmanned aircraft, the Happy Hooligans are stationed here in Fargo, and they have an unmanned UAV program. And I'm wondering if those are the same ones that you've worked with.
Well, they're going to be probably either the Predators, MQ-9s, or Reapers, or the Global Hawk. And I've worked on both.
Okay.
So I work on, like, my present job, I'm involved in both of those quite heavily. But my turbine engine career was with the Global Hawk side of things. So so hopefully that answers your question on the unmanned aerial vehicle stuff. As far as engine failures are concerned, engine failures, they don't happen frequently. You've got a lot of aircraft out there flying, and today's engines are very reliable. And so you're talking one failure in many, many thousands of hours. Sometimes when they went kaboom, it was not very often, but when it did, then of course, then we put a lot of focus on it, because obviously safety is paramount. So yeah, it was very rare, but very interesting when it did fail. Yeah, I was never involved in any fatality ones, by the way, just to make another thing very clear. Engines can fail. They can be removed from the wing. Aircraft can still land very safely. A lot of aircraft have two engines, and so one fails, they just carry on flying like nothing happened.
Well, that's the reality, is when people tell me that, I'm afraid to fly, something could happen, it might fail. That's why it's major news when it does, because it's a rarity. It's not that often that something like that really occurs.
Right. Yeah, and they really have to hype it up, it seems, because they're it failed, but okay, just shut it off, carry on flying.
Right. And just work around, and again, I liked what you said about problem solving, because if there is a failure, again, there's so many thousands of flying hours before there's a problem. You want to know why. There's just a higher risk reward to know.
Absolutely. Many of the occurrences I was involved in meant that we'd go back and look at the design to see if there's something that could be improved. And even if there wasn't a major failure, but even on, like, the Hercules, the newer Hercules engines, we, when we had failures in the early days there, small failures or things we found wrong, that would just get taken right back and then looked at to see if it could be a design improvement. So absolutely. Anyway, I'm spending way too much time on turbine engines. I could talk about them all day long.
That's okay. I can talk about farm equipment all day long. So take your pick.
They fail too.
Yes, they do.
So I wanted you on here for a couple of different reasons. your children were involved in a serious crash. And in our podcast, we like to talk to people that have been through very traumatic events and how they have survived and how they have continued to thrive and still have a good attitude. So first of all, for the audience, share what you want to share about the vehicle crash that your children were in.
Well, I'll keep it really short. It was late at night. Daughter driving, 3 sons in the back seat, and then a friend of my daughter's in the right-hand passenger seat. And not even a quarter mile from home, they wiped out on the gravel road, hit the ditch, did an end over end, and then landed back on the wheels. And in the process of that, then the 2 youngest boys, right rear seat and center rear seat, they were concussed, but otherwise okay. My daughter was driving, and she suffered 5 fractured vertebrae in her upper back and neck, including lots of lacerations and getting knocked out and everything. She was in rough shape. And then my son was in the rear left seat, and he ended up with a badly dislocated shoulder and pulverized T12 vertebrae. So ended up paralyzed from about the belly button down.
How soon after the crash happened did you hear about it? Was it pretty much right away? It was only a quarter mile away from the house.
My wife at the time, she was at home just waiting for them to come home. I was actually at work because I was getting ready for a business trip that I was leaving for the next morning. So we had just been speaking a few minutes before, like not even 5 minutes before. And then my youngest son went running in the door, telling her that there was a crash. And so she called me back right away to say that there was an accident. She didn't know how they were. She told me where they were, just down the street. And she says, the kids were in an accident. I don't know how they are. It's just down the street. I have to go.
Mm-hmm.
So she hung up the phone. And so I had a 25-minute drive normally from that point. It wasn't 25 minutes that day.
No, they're generally a bit faster than that.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So I came upon a scene that was it was dark, like I told you, so I could see all the emergency vehicle lights reflecting off the clouds well before I got there, well before I got around the corner to see what was actually there. So yeah, there was a lot of attention.
Were the kids out of the vehicle by that point when you got there?
The 2 youngest were. The friend in the passenger seat, she was out right from the beginning. But no, both of my kids were still in the vehicle. They did not look good. So, yeah.
So, because that side of the vehicle was so much more damaged, you said it was an end over end. How did that happen?
Yeah, it smacked mostly on the roof with a bit of an angle towards the left side. So everything inside will have just slammed against the side upper, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why both the 2 on the left-hand side were, broken windows, and they were both impacting the upper corner of the vehicle really hard.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was a GMC, Blazer. That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So a very, very hard armrest on the door.
Yes.
I think that's really what did it. I think that's what did it for Tyrone.
Okay.
What can you tell us about the next few days?
Pretty chaotic. People handle things differently, right? My daughter, the 3 boys, they were sent off to the children's hospital, 2 different ambulances. And my daughter was sent to an adult hospital because she was she was 18.
Mm-hmm.
So our kids ended up 2 different hospitals. And then, of course, now once the 2 were released, then now we had kids 3 different places. So that got interesting. So luckily, family were able to step in and help out with them. But I was initially at the hospital with my daughter, where my wife was with my eldest son. But then things became apparent that he was in pretty bad shape. So they actually the emergency services were talking to each other, and they felt that I should go over to the other hospital. So the police took me over there. Yep. From that point, there was a matter of diagnosing what all the issues were. My daughter had to be stabilized, and then eventually decision had to be made whether there was going to be surgery or just simply set everything in place and lock it down and wait for several months until everything healed, which was the course we took. And then with my son, it was a case where, well, first of all, we had to figure out how bad the damage was. And then that was 4 months in the hospital as a result of that.
So physical damage is one thing. But what about the damage with your daughter? I mean, she was 18, she was the driver, she was the responsible adult. Excuse me, and I don't want to make that sound callous, but as the oldest sister who would have been the driver as well, I'm curious what she was thinking and talking about.
Yeah. I want to be careful not to speak on her behalf.
Sure.
This is her story.
Yeah.
Like her angle to tell, so to speak. But I could say that everyone had to process it. Of course, she was feeling bad. She had some really major issues medically as well to deal with. So, frankly, the mental health side of it was a little bit harder to deal with because, as you know, it's a field that's less known, and in some circles, including ours, it's not as it was not at the time was not as how can I say accepted as something that really needs to be addressed heads on.
Right.
So I couldn't speak for how she feels about it today. Myself, I further down the road than I was seeking psychology, that sort of thing, to help myself out so that I could figure out how to deal with the family because of all this. Mm-hmm. As far as my son was concerned, well, he's got a really good story there, which has a bit of a follow-up as well. Don't know if you want me to get into that, David.
Yeah.
So this accident happened about 10 o'clock at night, thereabouts. And then chaos ensued for the next several hours where, the first while was just trying to get them out of the vehicle without causing more problems and actually,
killing them.
Yeah.
Right.
It was not good. But then around 1:30 at night now, so somewhere between 12:30 and 1, then we knew the score. We knew what was going on. He was now stable. He was laying in a hospital bed in ICU. And one of my best friends was sitting there with me. My wife was at the other hospital at this point. We swapped places. So she went to be with my daughter while I was with my son. And so he's sitting in this dark ICU room, just a little bit of low light, and just waiting for morning because the surgeon was going to be in the morning to take a look at things and figure out what to do. Mm-hmm. And so my son, he just, I have to give you a point of reference here. This was September 2010. So the Olympics and Paralympics had happened just earlier that year. Mm-hmm. So dark ICU, all of a sudden he pipes up after several minutes of everyone just sitting there quietly. And he just says, and these were his words. He says, "Well, I knew I was never going to play for the men's Olympic hockey team. So I'm going to play for the Canadian sledge hockey team instead."
Okay. How old was he at the time?
16.
Yeah.
Almost 17.
I think that's pretty important to remember, the 16-year-old mindset of not being defeated.
Yeah, very, very much so. And my reaction to that, first of all, was, what's sledge hockey? I didn't even know what sledge hockey was. But he had watched the Paralympics, and here I was, the dad back in February, March that was trying to get a kid to bed, because it was in Vancouver, right? So 3 hours behind us, and so every night he was staying up super late watching the Olympics and then the Paralympics. And I gave up after a while and just started going to bed because I couldn't stay up like he was. So then when he ended up speaking about the Paralympics and the sledge hockey, I knew nothing about it because I hadn't seen any of it. But anyway, so he made that comment, and just as an interesting follow-up to that, a few years later, he says to me, we were having a conversation about some other things, and he says, well, you know, Dad, when I said that, it was as much for you as it was for me.
Mm-hmm.
So
he knew.
Yeah,
he knew he needed to make sure that you understood he was going to be okay.
Yeah. It shows to me, it shows a remarkable awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's how he's maintained it. And today he's, well, I think this is
coming out March 16th. So,
well,
yeah. When was there, I was just looking at my calendar here. When was the team announced? February 14th?
It was announced just a few days ago. So around February 15, 16, 17, somewhere around there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and he's on the team for Team Canada.
Yeah, and this is his.
Yeah, he wasn't going to hold back for that. He was ready to go.
No.
This is his second time Size Matters.
Yeah.
He represented Canada at the Paralympics in 2018 at Pyeongchang.
Okay, now I just want to make sure people really put that in perspective. 2010 to 2018. And in that time, he grew himself to a Paralympian. And that's no small feat. I just want people to understand that the athleticism that he was able to display was tremendous.
Yeah, and absolutely.
And the stamina, not just the physical stamina, but the mental stamina, where he just said, I'm going to fulfill this.
Yeah. Keep in mind that he was also in hospital for 4 months straight.
Mm-hmm.
And then, losing all the muscle that he had, right? And then when he finally got out, then was a lot of physical recovery to do.
Yeah.
And he couldn't, doctors actually didn't, we
dislocated shoulder.
Orders.
Don't forget
we didn't follow doctor's orders, but he wasn't actually allowed to do anything for a full year. So make that 2011. And then he was on Team Canada by 2015.
That's crazy fast.
It's literally starting from ground zero. That's really what he did.
Well, so let me just give you one thing. Anybody that has experienced full paralysis or knows somebody that has, you go from, in his case, they're sitting on the edge of a bed, a hard bed, trying to figure out how to sit up and balance oneself. And so it's like, I liken it to sitting on an exercise ball with your feet in the air.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So then now put a sled underneath you that wants to do its own thing. And your pivot point is higher than the sled, the edge of the sled. So the fact that he can even do this just blows my mind.
A lot of people have paralysis that is lower down than what he has.
Right.
His paralysis is quite high.
And also some have partial as well. His is complete. Right? That makes a huge difference as well. Yeah.
So there's so many, like, I didn't realize how many different things affect, like it's incredible the upper body strength he has to have to do this stuff, and coordination and balance. I still have no idea. I'm just in awe.
Yeah.
And when you say that about his paralysis, when you think about the folks that from that point, it would be the fact that they have lost the ability to use hands, right? But it sounds like he has that upper body strength, but he also is still able to use his hands and so forth. Whereas some folks, when they hit that midline, they could maybe move their shoulders up and down, but they don't have hand control. That be correct?
Yeah, there's all sorts of different levels of paralysis, and so if quadriplegia is, and complete or partial as well, right? So you can have paralysis of some limbs and not others, and all sorts of combinations. His is just a very defined line around his belly button. So he has his upper half of his core, his shoulders, which of course also had to recover because of the injury to them.
Right.
So then I'll just draw one more thing, is that him in a sled, put that up against most of the American players that have either single or double leg amputations. They have their full core, and often cases their glutes.
Yep.
And so he's competing against folks that have full control of their sled all the way through their buttocks. So so even at, like, the captain of his team at in Korea was on video saying that that he's the well, I'll just toot the horn anyway. He was the best in the world for that level of paralysis, or that level of disability, hands down.
From someone who complained about having to do her planks today, talking about core, I got nothing here, nothing.
Yeah. So when you talk about the mental health side of it, I know that for him, very much of this has been that he wants to play on the team. He wants to beat the U.S. Coming up again now, and every year, whenever they're competing against the U.S., it's getting kind of frustrating that they've been losing to the U.S. In the gold medal games, but they beat them in the other games. So it's extremely frustrating. So for him, it's a huge driver, and so I guess time will tell. By the time this comes out, then we'll know. But his focus has been to put himself to work and deal with the mental side of it.
But that's his goal. He's not going to stop till he reaches his goal. That's the fortitude that he has built for himself.
That's right. And he thinks team, also from the example of how he wanted to let me know that things were okay, and that awareness that he shows, that same thing translates into how he works with his teammates.
Right.
It's not a thing about him. It's about the team. So I think that's also a huge mental, a point of mental strength for him.
Absolutely, because you need those people for things during the day. You want to make sure that you build them up as much as they build you up.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So let's go back to your son's attitude and the way he approaches everything that he does. I don't think it just matters in Paralympics. I think that that's his everyday, how he's going to survive, because all of us just survive this life. This is not an easy road for anyone, but he looks at it as, this is how I'm going to do my everyday, is my guess.
Yeah, it's a huge example to me. Hockey Canada, I'm not going to give away any secrets here, but this is no beer league. Right?
No, no.
This
is not like the dads who left for the weekend to go do the curling championship because they heard there was free beer. No, that's not it.
No, not at all. This is serious stuff. So they are monitored daily on their food, their exercise, their sleep, everything. And this is every 4 years. You have to fight for your position on the team every year. And when you're on the team, that doesn't mean you go to the competitions, because there's always a few cuts at the end. And so if you have not proven yourself, then you don't go. And
okay.
So you're constantly on the bubble. And the way that he approaches that, I honestly don't understand how he maintains such a level of tenacity and everything that goes with that. He blows me away. He does.
Do you think that changed before? Do you think that changed because of the crash, or do you think he was already that way and it's now just more pronounced?
Well, I did touch on the fact that I had a hard time getting him to bed so he'd be in shape for school the next day. So I think with a goal, that has changed things. Earlier on, you could say that things were not as clear for him, but when things became more clear, then it made a difference.
Sharpened his focus.
Absolutely. No, I don't want to say that's because of the crash. Who knows? This is one of those kind of cases where you could play all kinds of scenarios. Who really knows?
Right.
But it clearly his focus has sharpened. Absolutely.
He's a pretty quiet guy, or has been most of his life, as far as I know. And it's not
Yes.
the same thing, with everything that's going on now. There's just that quietness, the resolve behind, like, don't mistake seeing him being quiet. There's a tiger inside, He's like, he's determined. It's pretty cool.
I bet that's, you may think, he seems pretty laid back and quiet, but I bet his teammates see something different. And it may not be loud and boisterous, but there's more than likely that tenacity and that take charge that he does, irregardless, because they probably see it more than you see it as family.
That's true. And, because I've heard from teammates of his saying that it's not only just one of that have said this, but I've heard it several say that he's the hardest working guy on the team. So they recognize that.
Yeah. He has the biggest challenges. So let's switch gears a little bit. When this comes out, the Paralympics will be in the middle of going on. So watch for Canada team jersey number 5. That's Andrew's son, Ty, and my nephew.
Last name Henry. Henry.
Isn't it fun to have? It's fun to have somebody that you know of to cheer for versus just whoever those people are. Now there's a name and a face associated with it.
And
Absolutely.
Andrew and I have a cousin that's been in the high level sports, and that's great. But this is even more special, that it's so tough. It's tough for an athlete to get to where they are, but for him to come from where he's been to representing Team Canada, that's just unbelievable. Like that's far above and beyond making Team Canada rowing or something,
So your podcast, you like to talk about mental health and strategies and all that. So I'll mention this. When I was going to say Vancouver, I meant London. When the London Olympics were going on in 2012, not taking anything away from Olympians, to get to that level, as you said, David, is absolutely incredible. Channel 4 in Britain, they were the ones that were going to be broadcasting the Paralympics. And so as the Olympics were underway, and then there's usually a week or so gap between the Olympics and Paralympics, then they put up billboards all over London. I thought it was just brilliant. Just a very simple statement. Thanks for the warm-up. So I thought there was perfect British cheekiness to highlight, sure, that was nice, now watch this.
Right. That's absolutely fantastic that they used that as a lever for people to pay attention to what was going on with the Paralympics.
Yeah.
So we were planning to do some more things. I think we'll have to have you on another time here soon. But I have another request. A trip that you have been on that has been your most memorable trip for whatever reason. What kind of memory do you have that's like when you sit around a campfire telling a story?
That was so going to be my question. So yes, what is that?
Well, I'm going to throw you a curveball, because the best trip I've ever been on was with my son to the Grand Canyon. But I think that's not what you're asking.
Oh no, I want whatever you want.
Think of it this way: if you come back for another episode, then you get to share more than one story. So you could go with the Grand Canyon one.
Yeah, no. So I took my youngest son when he was 15 for a trip to the Grand Canyon, and we spent 4 days down in the pit, and it was absolutely stunning. And I'll just okay.
How do you get down there without falling? Like, how do you get down?
Oh man,
Follow
the trails. Yeah, we went to Grand Canyon Village. There's a Bright Angel Trail that goes down. You can take that trail, Bright Angel Trail, all the way to the river. to the ranch at the bottom there. We went halfway down to what's called the Tonto Trail, which is it's halfway. It's called Indian Garden. There's an oasis down there.
Yeah.
And then you head west along this trail that is sometimes very narrow with fairly steep on your left and fairly steep on your right. And you just work your way westward. And we went down half a day, west half a day, camped for the night, west again for another while, and eventually down to the river on Hermit's Trail. And then on the fourth day, we went from Monument Creek up the Hermit's Trail this time, out to the top. And just very quickly, on the fourth day, when we were on our way out and things were particularly challenging, then I also had a code throughout this time, because my son would get ahead of us. I had a guide, and then there's a young couple from Australia. He would get way ahead of us, so that made me rather uncomfortable, because he'd disappear around these canyon walls. And so I would whistle, and depending on the code, that would tell him what he had to do. Well, he was getting me nervous, so then I gave him the code to come back. And so he wanders back, and so just as an excuse, I asked him, excuse for pulling him back. I said, so how is this? Day 4, how is this? In his very calm, kind of bored way, he says, yeah, this is all right. And I said, well, I took you out of school and everything for this, so I hope it was a little better than that. And he goes, yeah, it's okay. I said, well, what would be better? Space would be better. Okay.
That sounds like
okay.
it.
Okay, you
to set the expectations. Yeah, set the
you
expectations.
Can go now. Once he got away from me, I said to the guide, Drew, I said, yeah, I guess that kind of tells you what he thinks of this. It was very cool.
It was very
if you
cool.
have a chance to go in the Grand Canyon, oh my goodness, so beautiful.
Do that. Very cool.
But there's another thing to do with this aircraft that I fly, that I did a kind of cool trip this past summer, which is maybe something to talk about sometime.
Yeah, we'll do that, and maybe we'll have to do a follow-up. Or not maybe. We will do a follow-up sometime, and we'll
That'll be
talk some more.
excellent.
And want to thank Rush Truck Centers in the GTA, in Markham. Jordan is a fantastic guy, man of his word, and always willing to help out people and stand by what he does. And what else do we need to remind people? Size matters.
Please go ahead and listen to the podcast. Make sure to give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to podcasts. And as always, join us at crazycanucktruckin.com to leave your questions, comments, and join us with any of our social media platforms. So thanks for listening today, everyone.